Hello and welcome back to TEFL Superstar Training. This lecture is on the teacher and it's the first part of the module about the teaching context. So, Superstar teaching qualities. What makes a good teacher? So, I want you to think back. I want you to close your eyes and think back to a time where you remember a teacher for being awesome. Try and remember why they were awesome, what it was about them that made them so awesome, and why that had an effect on you. If you want, you can pause the video now and actually download the PDF and do that separately before we continue. You're more than welcome to. I really want you to consider your past and reflect on it. So, some superstar teacher qualities. Perhaps you remember. I remember teachers who I particularly liked at school, for example. They were fun. They didn't take life too seriously. They were personable. They got to know you. They used your name. They were caring. They wanted to know more than just who you were or what your name was. They tried to understand your background and understand your potential. And they were engaging, so they made the classes interesting, and they made them relevant. A bit like Einstein over here, he was a super intellectual, but he also knew how to have fun. What about trying to recall a terrible teacher you had in the past? Hopefully not too many. Terrible teacher qualities, no? They didn't care. Didn't care about you, didn't care about their job. They were dull, and they talked a lot. They talked a lot. They smell bad. Do you remember a teacher that smelled bad? It's kind of weird, right? But it's true. Trust your nose. I remember some of the older teachers who just bad breath, and you were like, ugh. And there was a few that I remember that were like that. What about the teachers that only ever used the book, the textbook? It was all book work. I'm sure you can think of a lot more. And if you do, I'm sure you can. I would like you to share them in the comments below. So, the superstar list of highly effective teaching qualities in no particular order. So, professional. Okay, professional, organised, energetic, patient, knowledgeable. You can look these up in the dictionary if you don't know what they mean. But we'll go into a bit more detail later. Resourceful, imaginative, entertaining, aware, so tactful, and approachable. They were clear, diplomatic, imaginative, caring, systematic, managerial. Enthusiastic, supportive, respectful, consistent, punctual, and adaptable. So what kind of teacher roles are expected from you? You must have the ability to wear many hats as a teacher. That means you take many different roles, and not necessarily all at the same time, but you have to wear a different hat for the right kind of situation. So here are some examples. With controller. A controller would be someone who literally is control of the class. Everything's focused around you as being the teacher. Now that's all good and fine, but you wouldn't want to do all your classes. You wouldn't want to be the controller of everything, because you wouldn't let your students have any control themselves. Assessor. You're obviously going to assess your students and judge and critique them and let them know where they're going right, when they're going wrong. You can be a resource. You can tell your students where to find more information, where they can find more useful materials online or offline that will help them in their learning. You have to be a coach. You have to help them put strategies forward to help develop their learning. Some students sometimes come in with very little educational experience, so you need to coach them to success and tutor them. So by tutoring means perhaps spending 5 minutes after class to personally tutor them, help them to where they define their problem and give them some solutions. You're also obviously an organizer. You need to organize your time. You need to organize your curriculum, you have to organise your classes, lots of things you have to organise. People too, you have to essentially manage people, organise them into groups or into pairs. You're also a facilitator. So in these days, I suppose you're not expected to know everything about the English language. For most schools, you're expected to facilitate the course and the curriculum, facilitate the exams. You don't necessarily need to know everything off by heart, you just need to facilitate the learning using the coursebooks. Yes, sometimes you have to be a counsellor as well. You need to listen to your students, listen to their problems and offer them those solutions. You need to be a learner yourself. You need to take that role of being the example. Learning doesn't stop with getting a certificate. Continual learning is key to professional development. And that ties in with being a role model. Being a role model is in a sense of you're on time. If you're not on time for classes, then why should your students be? You need to be a motivator, and we'll definitely look at motivation later. And a communicator. You need to be a highly effective communicator. And that doesn't mean talking lots. It means being concise and precise about the words you use and the meanings that you're conveying, as not to confuse students. If you talk too much, you end up confusing them. So a key, you need to be an effective communicator. You need to have teacher knowledge. Now, teacher knowledge is expected of you. Specifically for English, it's the language system. So that is lexical and grammatical. So those are words, and the grammar. Students are expecting you to be able to explain to them different grammatical points and help group lexical features. Sounds, stress and intonation are obviously very important when it comes to pronunciation. And students also tend to, you need to help them with the formalities of English. Some English is more formal than other English. You have colloquial English, slang. And your students are expecting you to tell them the difference. Now, when you're beginning, it's true that you might struggle to answer your students' questions. You often get, "Teacher, what's the difference between for and since?" "Teacher, what's the difference between A and B?" And you go, "You know what, that's a good question." At that point, you don't really want to say, "Oh, I don't know, I'm sorry, can't help you." What you want to do is say, "You know what, that's a very good question. I'm not 100% sure. I don't want to give you false information. So let me check that and I'll get back to you tomorrow." Now, the key part of maintaining your integrity is to actually do that, is to follow up and bring that information to class the day after. Otherwise, your students are going to start thinking that you don't really know what you're talking about either. So you don't have to know everything from day one, but you should be progressing as time goes on. And if you don't know, then that's fine. Just find out and come back to your student. You also, teacher knowledge is based on the materials as well and resources. So you are going to want to provide all the extra materials that they need in order to succeed in classes. And that's the same with resources. What resources can you bring to the classroom that is going to aid in learning? Now, that might be a dictionary. They may have never seen a dictionary, a physical one, so bringing a resource like that, it is going to help them become autonomous in their learning. There are websites like wordreference.com. There are pronunciation websites which help with the sounds. There are YouTube videos. All these kind of resources can be passed on to your student to help them. And classroom equipment, knowing how to effectively use classroom equipment, no? For example, your whiteboard, or perhaps you're using one of these electronic boards, and you can use PowerPoint presentations. Or I love to bring classic games word games into the classroom, like Scrabble or Boggle. And you're also expected to stay up to date. Education is evolving. It's not. You'll see later on with the methodologies of teaching a language, they have almost constantly been changing. So you need to stay up to date with the information that is available to you as an English teacher. So here are 3 best practices for being an effective English teacher. The first one is be professional. Okay, there is always a line. There's an educational line which you should never cross. You have to remember you're in an educational setting. If you're teaching kids and young, teenagers, you need to be especially careful. With adults, you definitely got a bit more leeway. But what does being professional consist of? Well dressed and groomed appropriately. Okay, so looking good. You look good. You feel smart. You don't want to come in with a bird's nest on your head. You want to make sure your hair is all tidy. And as I mentioned earlier, you want to make sure you smell good. Teaching, frequently kind of getting physically close to your students, monitoring their work, and you don't want to be smelling like cigarettes or have bad BO. So you also want us to be punctual and dependable. That means you arrive to classes before the start of classes, and you are dependable, as in you come to classes when you're supposed to. Teachers will not appreciate if you're not dependable, and nor the students. It's really key that they have consistency and that they can progress with you. So to be changing teachers to have cover teachers, that's not going to help your students. You also need to be organised and structured. So organisation, where am I going with my classes? Have I done an outline for the month? And am I structuring my classes so that they progress in an effective manner? Also, your board and lesson materials should be prepared before class. You shouldn't be planning in class. That looks extremely unprofessional. And if you can, set up your board, if you have a whiteboard or a blackboard, before class. So again, makes you look professional. The lesson is on task and has an objective which is relevant to what you're learning. It shouldn't just be about whatever you feel like teaching today. You should command respect by essentially respecting your students, being fair, non-judgmental, giving everyone a chance, being inclusive, and being respectful of your students, and thus you will command respect from them. And you will be expected, of course, to keep excellent records of classes, so attendance lists, class reports, the red tape of teaching, which isn't talked about a lot, but it's something that we do have to do. It's usually a requirement from the local Ministry of Education, and of course it helps to, if you need someone to cover you, it's very important for everyone to know what exactly you've done in the previous class. And apart from that, schools also need to keep excellent records for their pupils, especially for teenagers who aren't paying for their courses. Their parents are, and therefore their parents want to know if their kids have been turning up to school or not. So, build rapport, yes. What does rapport mean? Well, it means like a link, a relationship essentially. This is really, really crucial. The being professional one is important for your appearance and for the workplace, but if you really want to smash being a English teacher, then build rapport with your students. Why? Or how, I should say. Well, friendly and respectful, we kind of mentioned that earlier. You want to smile, right? Come into classes smiling, like I'm happy to be here. And you need to be respectful of your students, so if they make a mistake, don't laugh at them. You need to be authentic with your personality. I feel that the best teachers I ever had were the ones that were themselves, to a certain extent. you do have to put on a kind of persona, a teaching persona, which encompasses your voice, how you're speaking to them, and how you're acting. Well, but you're not necessarily acting, as in you're not creating a new persona, you're simply yourself, but within that educational framework. You need to be adaptable in the classroom, so you need to, well, just imagine that one year you're teaching in South Korea and the next year you're teaching in South America. That's going to require a lot of adapting to the local culture, adapting to the students, adapting to their first language. You need to be adaptable. You also want to be able to be adaptable in the sense that you can change up the lessons so that they're more appropriate to students, the students you're teaching, their needs and desires. You need to care about your students, yeah? And the best way you can care about them is using their names. So at the beginning, when you're teaching, it might be quite difficult. You could have up to 50 to 100 students. Quite difficult to remember all those names. So what might you do? You might have everyone write their name on a card and have that in front of them. Some teachers also kind of create characteristics that help them remember names. So, you got John. John's tall and he's blonde. Okay. The point about using their names is that essentially you're finding out more about them, so you're more able to serve them. It's not just their names, but if at least you have their names, you're on the right path to knowing more about them, so you can better serve them. Energetic. You need to love teaching. So, not manic craziness, like running into the room, like acting like a clown. No. But you need to be stood up. You need to raise your energy level to make it, well, you need to make it interesting. And if you don't have the energy, then don't expect your students to have the energy. And fun, humour and jokes in the classroom. So I've got this kind of funny joke here in the corner. You rock and you rule. So, fun and humour, not taking the job too seriously. There are boundaries, don't cross the boundaries. Be culturally sensitive. Don't joke about people being hung when you're teaching in Saudi Arabia. It's probably not a very clever thing to do, is it? Or joke about women's rights, probably not going to get you very far, is it? But certainly you can be light-hearted and have a sense of humour. And finally, you want to create a comfortable, fair and safe learning space. Look a little bit into this later, but Maslow's hierarchy of needs, people need to feel comfortable and they need to feel like they belong into the group before they can reach that self-actualization, that learning, that bettering themselves. First, everything else needs to be fulfilled. Ideally, you should have come to class having eaten something first, because if you don't eat, then you're not going to concentrate and be such an effective learner. But you can't really do much about that. What you can do, though, is make everyone feel comfortable and safe in the learning space. So one of the ways I like to do that is, well, one, I use their names. And not only do I use their names, but I have them all learn each other's names. So that way that they're at least starting to care about their peers as well, and it just builds this kind of respectful classroom atmosphere. Student talk time. Let them speak, or get them to speak, not you. You can't be speaking the whole time. It'd be very boring just to hear you going to your teacher, and it's just those old school lectures. And this is a lecture, so yeah, you are just listening to me. But you don't really want to do that in a teaching language context. Ideally, they need to be practicing. They're the ones who are supposed to be practicing the language, not you. So how do you do that? Well, we call this student talk time, or STT for short. You kind of aim it to be 60% or higher. It's kind of a benchmark there to me. It depends on the level. You might find that at basic A1 level, you're speaking maybe perhaps a little bit more, and the advanced levels, they're speaking a little bit more. But it has to be more than 50% minimum. 60% ideal. 80% you've had a really effective class because they've just been speaking and practicing the whole time. So how might you go about doing this? Well, they can read everything. They can read the board, homework, directions, or the instructions, for tasks. Pronunciation practice and drilling, so repeat after me. You will want to ask them concept check questions. So we'll learn more about this later, but instead of saying, hey, do you understand, guys? And they just say, yeah. You basically are testing their knowledge. I love this one, question bounce. So instead of you going, hi, how are you? Fine. And the student answers fine. And then you go to the other student, how are you, student 2? Fine, they say. And you go to student 3, and how are you, student 3? I'm fine. Well, this is all you talking, so why not have them ask each other the questions? So I go to student A, how are you, student A? And they say, I'm fine. And then they ask student B, how are you? And then student B replies, I'm fine. And then student B says, how are you, to student C? Student C says, I'm fine, how are you? And it goes on like that way. Or, for example, if there's maybe I ask them to ask a follow-up question, so I can say, okay guys, that was really interesting, whatever this student A said. Student B, student C, can you ask them a follow-up question? So rather than me having to think about the question and me talking, I delegate that responsibility to them. I say, you guys think of it and you guys can do it. And similar to concept questions, eliciting information from learners. So this is elicit, not illicit, the illicit with I to mean illegal. This is elicit, which means to pull information. So you're eliciting information from learners, vocabulary, grammar points, about their day, anything basically, because by you asking them questions, you're allowing them to answer and just not lecturing. And finally, student-centered classes. You want to bring accountability to the classroom. You want, sometimes I have a student, maybe a one-on-one private student, and I will let them decide what we're going to work on today. So that allows them to feel like they're partaking more in that lesson, and obviously they're going to be more interested in it, and therefore they're going to have more things to talk about. So classroom culture, comparing and contrasting some good and bad classroom cultures. So let's start with the bad, or the super awful classroom culture. Learning is done best on your own and carried out in silence. It is getting it right, preferably the first time, that counts. And it is the teacher's job to impart learning. So, best on your own. Don't think so. I think we need to, we built this world together, so I think we should all cooperate and figure things out. First time it counts? No, mistakes are part of learning. And what is the job? What, the teacher's just, you're going to stand by the teacher and learn everything just by sitting next to him? No. You've got to do the work yourself. All learners can be classed as able, average, or less able. Well, that would be generalisation, wouldn't it? That would be generalising our students. It's not really fair, is it? Teachers believe that some people aren't good at learning. Ooh, really? I think we're all pretty smart people. I mean, humans are amazing creatures. Teachers and students do not trust each other and argue. Teachers and students do not trust each other and argue. Well, in some cases, yeah, but we don't want that to happen. Teacher talk dominates as a form of presenting information. Well, we talked about this, student talk time. Not you talking, them talking. I mean, you've got to talk, obviously, but you can't dominate it. So, much more interesting. Key features of a superstar classroom culture. There are many different learning styles. Yeah? It's not one way fits all. Effective learners take responsibility for their own learning. we're the guides. We're helping them get from A to B, but they need to do the walking. We just put them on the right path. Learning takes place socially. Well, hell yeah, we're social beings. This is how we constructed everything around us, was working together. Talk time and dialogue are key processes within learning. So yeah, we should discuss things, we need to talk about it. It can't all just be one way. We need to analyze and let it process by debating and thinking critically for ourselves. Mistakes are an integral part of the learning process. Yes, we need to make mistakes in order to learn. Effort should be rewarded within learning. Yeah, let's reward people for doing well, of course, and you should reward yourself for doing this course today as well. Teachers and students have great trusting relationships. Absolutely, that's what it should be like. Teachers are there to help the students, right? That's their point. That's the point of them being there. And positive exchanges predominate, right? We don't want to be saying, hey, I don't believe you, you're wrong. No, that's a rubbish answer. What are you doing? You want to be saying, well done, well done for trying. Good work, Jim, good work. So self-evaluation is critical to your own development. Looking and reflecting will help. If you finish a class and you're not going, I'm not sure how that one went, or did that one go well? Was that a good class? What do I need to improve on? What am I lacking? You're not you're not clarifying your own strengths and weaknesses, and therefore you're not giving yourself the ability to see where you can improve. So hopefully by the end of the course you'll be able to kind of tick all these boxes. The first being, I can teach a class effectively with ease and confidence. I can explain a language point quickly and concisely. I know how to plan a dynamic lesson addressing different learning styles. I know how to manage young people in the classroom. I can give advice about how to improve one's English skills and different international exams. So what I mean by that is you will be able to give people or your students an idea of what exams will be useful to them in the future. I can evaluate a student using the Common European Reference for Languages. We'll see more about that later. I actively partake in professional development programs. I'll be able to help you with finding out resources and places where you can do that. I know a significant percentage of English grammar off by heart. So, not quite now, but hopefully by the end of the course you will be at that point. I know the phonetics of English and how pronunciation is fundamental to communication. Boom. There's a comma there, shouldn't be a comma. I know where and how to apply for a job teaching English. So again, that's all the kind of things that I'm going to help you with. And if you think that I've missed something, then that's going to help you, because you can say, Ben, you haven't told me about this. So you'll know what's missing. Finally, you need to be proud of how hard you're working. I like this image. This idea of you got to pat yourself on the back for everything you do. I think we, as humans, we sometimes are quite self-critical, and we don't give ourselves credit for what we do, and it's difficult for other people to see the hard work that you put into everything you do. So the first thing you need to do is be proud of yourself and say, well done, well done, well done. You're doing a great job. Keep going. It's all worth it in the end. So you've got to remember though, don't take teaching too seriously. Life is meant to be enjoyed, and be proud of yourself for helping others. I think one of the biggest mistakes you can make in life is to take life too seriously. If you don't realise that we are here just in a moment's time, and life is a balance between obligations and responsibilities as well as pleasure and enjoyment, then you're overbalanced with the work, you're not going to be an effective teacher. And likewise, if you're too overly on the side of all fun and play, sing and song, you're equally not going to be an effective teacher. So the next module we're going to look at is the student.